The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched for miles in every direction. Floating platforms held representatives from 12 ancient species, each one older than the mountains of Earth. Light from 1,000 stars filtered through crystal walls, casting rainbow patterns across the floor where Daniel Mercer stood alone. He was the last hope for 8 billion people. Daniel looked up at the towering figures around him. The Korvathi were closest, their silver skin reflecting the starlight like mirrors. They had ruled this corner of the galaxy for 3 million years. Next to them floated the Velthari, beings of pure energy contained in magnetic shells. The Morvani watched with their 100 eyes, their tentacles wrapped around their voting pedestals. "You stand accused," the High Chancellor announced. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Humanity is charged with genetic instability, emotional volatility, and dangerous expansion. How do you answer?" Daniel swallowed hard. He had practiced this speech 1,000 times on the journey here. Earth's best minds had helped him craft every word. But standing in this ancient place, surrounded by beings who had mastered the stars when humans still lived in caves, he felt very small. "We answer with hope," Daniel said. His voice was steady, though his hands shook at his sides. "Yes, we are young. Yes, we make mistakes. But we learn. We grow. We dream of joining you among the stars, not as conquerors, but as friends." A sound like laughter rippled through the chamber. The Korvathi representative leaned forward, his silver face showing what might have been amusement. "Friends," he repeated. "In 200 years of space travel, your kind has colonized 40 worlds. You spread like a disease. You fight wars among yourselves while reaching for more territory. You are children playing with fire." "We are children," Daniel agreed. "But children grow up. Give us time. Give us guidance. We can be better." The Velthari representative pulsed with angry red light. "We have watched your kind for generations. You cannot control your own emotions. You hate. You fear. You destroy what you do not understand. These traits are written in your very genes." Daniel felt despair creeping into his heart, but he pushed it away. He thought of his daughter back on Earth, only 7 years old. He thought of all the children who would never see the stars if he failed today. "Every species here has a dark past," he said, his voice growing stronger. "The Korvathi conquered half the galaxy before they found peace. The Morvani nearly destroyed their own world with pollution. You all made mistakes. You all learned. Why can we not have the same chance?" Silence fell over the chamber. For a moment, Daniel dared to hope. Perhaps his words had reached them. Perhaps they would see humanity as he saw it, flawed but full of potential. Then the High Chancellor spoke again. "The Council will vote. One by one, the representatives cast their decisions." Daniel watched the lights appear on the central display. Red for exile. Green for acceptance. The first light was red. Then another. And another. 12 red lights glowed in the darkness. Daniel felt his knees go weak. "Please," he whispered. "Please. You cannot do this. We have so much to offer. We just need time." "Time is exactly what we are giving you," the High Chancellor said. There was no cruelty in his voice, only cold certainty. "Humanity will be contained within your home system. Your faster-than-light technology will be removed. A barrier will surround your sun, cutting you off from the rest of the galaxy. Perhaps in time, you will evolve beyond your violent nature. Perhaps not. Either way, you will no longer be our concern." Guards moved toward Daniel. They were gentle but firm as they took his arms. He struggled against them, not to escape, but because he could not accept what was happening. "You are making a mistake," he shouted as they pulled him away. "You think you are protecting the galaxy, but you are only protecting your own fear. One day, you will regret this. One day, you will wish you had shown mercy." The High Chancellor watched him go with ancient, tired eyes. "Perhaps," he said quietly. "But that day is not today." Within a month, it was done. Human ships found themselves unable to jump to faster-than-light speeds. Their engines simply stopped working beyond the orbit of Neptune. A shimmering wall of energy surrounded the entire solar system, invisible but absolute. Messages were sent into the void. Desperate pleas for reconsideration. They went unanswered. Earth's colonies outside the barrier were evacuated. Their populations returned to the home system like criminals being sent to prison. The galaxy moved on without them. On Earth, people watched the night sky and wept. The stars that had once seemed so close now felt impossibly far away. Children asked their parents why they could not visit other worlds anymore. The answers were hard to give. Daniel Mercer returned home to find his daughter waiting for him. She ran into his arms, and he held her tight, breathing in the smell of her hair. She was too young to understand what had happened, too young to know that her future had been stolen. "Did you see the aliens, Daddy?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Daniel forced himself to smile. "I did, sweetheart. I did. Were they nice?" He thought about the cold chamber, the red lights, the guards dragging him away. He thought about 8 billion people trapped forever in a cosmic cage. Some of them were, he lied. Some of them were very nice. That night, Daniel stood on his balcony and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was celebrating. The dangerous humans had been contained. The galaxy was safe. They had no idea what they had done. Humanity would not forget this day. They would not forget the feeling of being judged and found unworthy. They would not forget the casual cruelty of beings who saw themselves as superior. And in 800,000 years, they would make sure the galaxy never forgot either. The stars twinkled peacefully overhead, unaware that they had just witnessed the beginning of the longest and most patient revenge in the history of the universe. Daniel watched them until dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. The exile had begun, but it would not last forever. Nothing ever does. The first 10,000 years were the hardest. Humanity screamed into the void like a wounded animal, throwing everything they had against the invisible wall that surrounded their home. Ships crashed into the barrier and broke apart. Messages were broadcast on every frequency, begging for mercy, demanding justice, threatening war. Nothing worked. Nothing changed. Generations were born, lived, and died within the cosmic prison. The story of the exile was passed down from parents to children, growing into legend, then myth. Some people stopped believing it had ever happened at all. They said humans had always been alone. They said the stars were just lights in the sky. Nothing more. Wars broke out. Resources grew scarce. Earth itself became uninhabitable for a time. Poisoned by conflict and neglect, humanity scattered across the solar system, building colonies on Mars, the moons of Jupiter, the frozen rocks beyond Neptune. They fought each other because they had no one else to fight. But even in their darkest hours, they did not give up. Around the 50,000th year, something began to change. A young scientist named Peter Collins made a discovery that would alter the course of human history. He found that the containment barrier was not just a wall. It was a message. The energy patterns that made up the barrier contained information, complex mathematical structures that described the physics the elder races used to build their civilization. The council had meant the barrier as a prison, but they had accidentally given humanity a textbook. Peter spent his entire life decoding that information. His students continued his work after he died. Their students did the same. Century after century, humanity slowly learned the secrets of the universe from the very cage that held them captive. By the 100th millennium, humans had mastered genetic engineering. They could rewrite their own DNA like editing a book. They removed the flaws that the council had feared. They added strengths that nature had never imagined. Some humans grew gills and lived in the oceans of Europa. Others developed skin that could survive the radiation of space. A few even learned to live without bodies at all, uploading their minds into vast computer networks. But they kept their emotions. They kept their dreams. They kept the burning memory of what had been done to them. The solar system transformed. Humans built rings around the sun to capture its energy. They hollowed out asteroids and turned them into cities. They created artificial worlds where forests grew in the vacuum of space, protected by invisible shields. The population grew to trillions, each one aware of the barrier that surrounded them. Each one taught to remember the exile. Lisa Vance was born in year 412,802 of the imprisonment. She grew up on a research station orbiting Saturn, watching the rings spin slowly beneath her window. Her mother was a physicist. Her father was a historian. From them, she inherited both a brilliant mind and a deep understanding of what humanity had lost. "Why do we stay?" she asked her father one evening. She was 12 years old, curious about everything. "If we are so advanced now, why can we not break through the barrier?" Her father smiled sadly. "Because we have tried everything, little one. The barrier adapts, it changes, it is smarter than anything we can build." Lisa frowned at this answer. She did not like being told that something was impossible. It made her want to prove it wrong. She devoted her life to studying the barrier. While other scientists looked for ways to break through it by force, Lisa took a different approach. She studied the barrier like a living thing. She learned its patterns, its rhythms, its secrets. In year 412,847, she made the breakthrough that changed everything. Lisa was aboard the research vessel called Prometheus's Dream, drifting near the edge of the solar system. Her instruments detected something strange in the barrier's energy patterns. A fluctuation, a weakness. But not the kind of weakness that could be exploited by weapons or force. "It is a door," she whispered, staring at her screens in disbelief. "The barrier is not meant to keep us in forever. It is meant to keep us in until we are ready to leave." The Council had designed the barrier to open when humanity achieved a certain level of technological advancement. They had assumed this would never happen. They had assumed that humans would destroy themselves long before they reached such heights. They were wrong. Lisa transmitted her findings to the Human Continuity, the governing body that had emerged over the centuries. Within days, the greatest minds in the solar system were working on her discovery. They found that the barrier could be opened from the inside, but only by technology that operated on principles the elder races had never explored. The humans had spent 800,000 years pushing the boundaries of science. They had discovered things the Council could not imagine. They had built machines that bent the fabric of reality itself. Opening the door would be simple, but the continuity decided to wait. "We will not crawl out of our cage like beggars," declared the Prime Speaker, a woman named Catherine Blake. "We will not ask for scraps from those who imprisoned us. When we return to the galaxy, we will return as equals. No, we will return as something greater." For the next 400,000 years, humanity prepared. They built fleets of ships that could travel through dimensions the elder races did not know existed. They developed weapons that could unmake matter at the quantum level. They created medical technology that could cure any disease, reverse any aging, heal any wound. And they remembered. Every child learned the story of the exile. Every adult carried the weight of what the Council had done. The memory was passed down like a sacred flame, never allowed to go out. Lisa Vance did not live to see the return. She died peacefully in year 412,901, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. But her discovery had given humanity something more valuable than freedom. It had given them choice. When the barrier finally fell, it would not be because it had failed. It would be because humanity decided they were ready. They had spent 800 millennia growing stronger, smarter, and more patient than any species in the galaxy. The elder races had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about power and control. They had succeeded beyond their wildest nightmares. In the darkness of space, humanity waited. The barrier hummed around them, unaware that its purpose had already been fulfilled. The prisoners had become something new, something terrible, something beautiful, and soon, very soon, they would show the galaxy exactly what 800,000 years of exile had created. The silence was about to end. The barrier fell on the exact anniversary of the exile. This was not an accident. Humanity had waited 800,000 years. They could have waited a few more days to make a point. Admiral Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship, a vessel called the Silent Fury. Around him, 1,000 other ships hung in the darkness, their hulls gleaming with technology that defied every known law of physics. They were beautiful and terrible, weapons of war disguised as works of art. "All ships report ready," his first officer announced. "The barrier is opening." Nathan watched through the viewport as the shimmering wall of energy began to dissolve. For 800 millennia, that barrier had defined the limits of human existence. Now it was fading like morning mist under the sun. He felt a strange emotion in his chest. Not triumph, not anger. Something deeper, something older. The weight of every human who had ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of freedom. "Take us through," he ordered. The fleet moved forward as one. They passed through the gap in the barrier and entered the wider galaxy for the first time in 800,000 years. Sensors immediately began feeding information to the navigation computers. Star charts that had been theoretical for centuries suddenly became real. The galaxy had changed during humanity's imprisonment. Stars had died. New ones had been born. Civilizations had risen and fallen. But the elder races remained, still ruling from their ancient thrones. Still believing themselves the masters of creation. "Admiral," the communications officer said, her voice tight with excitement. "We are detecting a Velthari border station. They are attempting to scan us." Nathan smiled. The Velthari had been among the loudest voices calling for humanity's exile. They had called humans dangerous, unstable, unworthy of the stars. He wondered what they would think now. "Let them scan," he said. "Let them see what we have become." The Velthari station was a massive structure, home to thousands of the energy beings and their servant species. Its weapons were among the most powerful in the sector. Its shields could withstand the impact of a small moon. Against the human fleet, it might as well have been made of paper. Lieutenant Commander Megan Torres sat at the communications console, monitoring the confused signals coming from the station. The Velthari were searching their databases, trying to identify the unknown ships that had appeared on their sensors. They were finding nothing. "They have erased us," Megan said quietly. 800,000 years, and they have forgotten we ever existed." "Good," Nathan replied. "Then our return will be a surprise." The Velthari commander finally gave up searching the databases and opened a channel directly. His voice crackled through the speakers, translated automatically by human computers. "Unknown vessels. You have entered Velthari space without authorization. Identify yourselves immediately or face destruction." Nathan nodded to Megan. She leaned forward and spoke into the microphone, her words carefully chosen. She used the old galactic common tongue, the language that humanity had learned from the barrier itself. "We remember." There was a long pause. Then the Velthari commander spoke again, his voice confused. "Clarify your meaning. What do you remember?" "Everything," Megan said. "We remember the council chamber. We remember the 12 red lights. We remember being told we were too dangerous, too emotional, too human to be allowed among the stars. We remember 800,000 years of exile. And now, we have returned." The Velthari commander's response was immediate. Alarms blared across the station. Weapons powered up. Shields activated. A fleet of warships launched from the station's hangars, forming a defensive line between the humans and the station. "This is impossible," the commander said. "The containment field was permanent. You cannot have escaped." Nathan stood and walked toward the viewport. He looked at the Velthari ships, each one bristling with weapons designed to destroy enemies at the molecular level. Once, they would have been terrifying. Now, they looked like children's toys. "We did not escape," he said, his voice calm. "We outgrew our cage. And now, we are going to show you exactly what that means." He gave the order. The human fleet moved forward, not with aggression, but with absolute confidence. The Velthari ships opened fire, pouring enough energy into space to crack a planet in half. The shots passed harmlessly through the human vessels as if they were not even there. The humans had learned to exist in multiple dimensions at once. They could shift their physical forms between states of matter that the elder races did not know existed. The Velthari weapons were designed to destroy things that were solid, things that were real in the traditional sense. The human ships were beyond such limitations. The fleet passed through the Velthari armada without firing a single shot. They phased through hulls and shields like ghosts walking through walls. They emerged on the other side unharmed, leaving the Velthari staring in horrified disbelief. Nathan opened a channel to the station. "We could have destroyed you," he said simply. "We chose not to. Remember that. Remember it well. And tell the Council that humanity has returned." The fleet continued on its way, leaving the Velthari behind. Word spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The exiled species had come back. They had technology that made the elder races look primitive, and they were not asking for permission. Within days, every major species in the galaxy knew the truth. The humans were free. The humans were powerful. And the humans remembered everything. On 100 worlds, the elder races began to panic. Emergency meetings were called. Military forces were mobilized. Ancient alliances were renewed, but deep down, they all knew it was pointless. They had seen the recordings from the Velthari border. They had watched the human ships ignore the most advanced weapons in the sector. There was no defense against an enemy that could not be touched. Nathan Cole stood on his bridge and watched the stars stream past. For the first time in 800,000 years, humanity was free to go wherever they pleased. The galaxy stretched out before them, vast and full of possibility. "What now, Admiral?" Megan asked. Nathan thought about the question for a long moment. They could conquer. They could destroy. They could take revenge for 800 millennia of imprisonment. But that was not the human way. Not anymore. "Now," he said, "we go to the Council. We have some unfinished business." The fleet changed course, heading toward the heart of the galaxy, toward the ancient chamber where humanity had once been judged and found unworthy. It was time to return the favor. The great chamber of the Galactic Council had not changed in 800,000 years. The same crystal walls filtered starlight into rainbow patterns. The same floating platforms held representatives from the elder races. The same cold, ancient atmosphere filled the air. But everything else was different. Only 11 platforms were occupied now. The 12th stood empty, a dark reminder of the Morvani, who had gone extinct when their sun exploded 300,000 years ago. They had lacked the technology to save themselves. They had died waiting for help that never came. The remaining representatives watched in terrified silence as a single human walked across the chamber floor. Kevin Park moved with quiet confidence, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He wore no armor, carried no weapons. He did not need them. Behind him, visible through the crystal walls, the human fleet hung in space like a swarm of metal stars. They had arrived without warning, passing through every defense the Council had built. Now they waited, patient and still, while their ambassador delivered humanity's message. High Chancellor Zethran of the Korvathi leaned forward on his platform. His silver skin had dulled with age, and his eyes held a fear that Kevin found deeply satisfying. "This is impossible," Zethran said. His voice was weak. Nothing like the thunderous authority his ancestors had used to condemn humanity. The containment field was designed to last forever. "How did you escape?" Kevin stopped in the center of the chamber, exactly where Daniel Mercer had stood 800,000 years ago. He looked up at the elder races, these beings who had once seemed like gods. They looked small now, fragile, afraid. "We did not escape," Kevin said. "We evolved. We grew. We became something you never imagined possible. And we did it alone. Without your help. Without your guidance. Without your mercy." The Velthari representative pulsed with agitated light. "What do you want? Revenge? Destruction? Name your terms, and let us negotiate." Kevin laughed. The sound echoed through the chamber, and several of the elder races flinched at the noise. They had never heard human laughter before. They did not know what to make of it. "You misunderstand," Kevin said. We are not here to negotiate. We are not here to threaten. We are here to show you something." He raised his hand, and holographic images filled the chamber. The elder races watched in confusion as they saw human ships traveling through dimensions that should not exist. They saw human doctors curing diseases that had plagued their species for millions of years. They saw human engineers stabilizing dying stars, creating new worlds, bending the fabric of reality like clay. "This is what we achieved during our exile," Kevin continued. "We solved problems you have struggled with since before humans existed. We discovered technologies you dismissed as impossible. We became the most advanced species in the galaxy, perhaps in the universe." He paused, letting the images fade. Then he spoke again, his voice soft but filled with weight. "And do you know what the saddest part is? We would have shared all of this with you. 800,000 years ago, we came to you as friends. We asked to join your community. We wanted to learn from you and grow alongside you. We would have given you everything we discovered, freely and without condition." Zethran's face twisted with something that might have been shame. "We were afraid," he admitted. "Your species was so aggressive, so unpredictable. We thought we were protecting the galaxy." "You were protecting your power," Kevin corrected. "You were afraid that we would surpass you. And you were right to be afraid. But instead of guiding us, you imprisoned us. Instead of helping us grow, you left us alone in the dark." He turned slowly, looking at each of the 11 representatives in turn. The Korvathi, the Velthari, the others whose names humans had learned to curse during the long centuries of exile. "The Morvani died because their sun exploded," Kevin said. "We could have saved them. We had the technology to stabilize their star 300,000 years before they went extinct, but we were locked in our cage, unable to help, while an entire species burned." Several of the representatives lowered their eyes. They had all known about the Morvani. They had all watched them die. None of them had been able to do anything about it. "4 of your species suffer from genetic degradation," Kevin continued. "Your populations are declining. Your children are born weaker than their parents. In another 100,000 years, you will follow the Morvani into extinction. We have the cure. We developed it 500,000 years ago." Hope flickered in the eyes of some representatives. Kevin saw it and felt something cold in his heart. "We could save you," he said. "We could share our technology, our knowledge, our discoveries. We could lift your species to heights you never dreamed possible." He paused. The chamber was completely silent. "But we will not." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Zethran opened his mouth to speak, but Kevin raised his hand. "Not because we want revenge. Not because we hate you. But because you need to learn the same lesson you tried to teach us. You need to understand what it feels like to be helpless. You need to experience the desperation of watching your people suffer, while those who could help choose not to." Kevin turned and began walking toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the silence. "Wait," Zethran called out. "Please. We made a mistake. We were wrong. But surely, after all this time, you can find it in your hearts to forgive us." Kevin stopped but did not turn around. He thought about Daniel Mercer, standing in this same chamber, begging for mercy. He thought about the 12 red lights. He thought about 800,000 years of isolation. "Forgiveness is not the issue," he said quietly. "The issue is consequences. You made a choice 800,000 years ago. Now, you will live with the results of that choice. Perhaps, in time, you will learn the value of compassion. Perhaps you will understand why mercy is strength, not weakness." He looked over his shoulder, and his eyes were ancient and sad. "We will not conquer you. We will not destroy you. We will simply watch. And when your species finally develop the wisdom you claimed to have 800,000 years ago, we will be here. Until then, you will face your future alone." Kevin walked out of the chamber. Behind him, the elder races sat in stunned silence, watching their empire crumble around them. The humans had returned. And they had brought something worse than war. They had brought justice. 10,000 years passed after humanity's return to the stars. In that time, the galaxy changed more than it had in the previous million years. The old order crumbled like sandcastles before the tide. The new order rose in its place, built on principles the elder races had once mocked and feared. Captain Allison Grant stood on the observation deck of her vessel, watching the Corvathi homeworld turn slowly below. The planet had been beautiful once, covered in silver forests and crystal oceans. Now it was dying. The cities that had stood for 4 million years were crumbling. The population that had once numbered in the trillions had fallen to mere billions. Their sun was failing. A slow death, but certain. In another 50,000 years, it would collapse entirely, and the Corvathi would join the Morvani in extinction. Humanity could save them. A single human engineering team could stabilize their star in a matter of weeks. The technology existed. The knowledge existed. The will did not. "It seems cruel," said Derek Huang, her first officer. He was young, barely 200 years old, still idealistic in ways that Allison had long outgrown. "They are suffering. Their children are dying. And we just watch." Allison nodded slowly. She understood his feelings. She had felt the same way once, many years ago. But she had also studied history. She knew what the Corvathi had done. She knew why humanity had made this choice. "Do you know the story of Daniel Mercer?" she asked. Derek frowned. "The first ambassador. The one who pleaded for humanity before the council." "Yes. Do you know what happened to him after the exile?" "He returned to Earth. He lived out his life. He died." Allison shook her head. "He did not just die. He spent the rest of his life fighting to free humanity. He organized resistance movements. He funded research into the barrier. He never stopped believing that one day, humans would return to the stars." She paused, watching a Corvathi ship struggle to take off from the planet below. Its engines flickered and failed. It crashed back to the surface in a cloud of dust. "He had a daughter," Allison continued. "Her name was Sophie. She was 7 years old when the exile happened. She grew up in a cage, knowing that the universe had rejected her species. She never saw the stars the way her father had promised she would." Derek was silent, waiting for her to continue. "Sophie had children. Her children had children. Generation after generation, trapped in the same prison, carrying the same pain. 800,000 years of suffering because the Corvathi and the other elder races were afraid of what humanity might become." Allison turned to face her first officer. Her eyes were calm but hard. "We do not refuse to help them because we want revenge. We refuse because they need to understand. They need to feel what we felt. They need to know the weight of helplessness, the despair of watching your people suffer while those who could help turn away." "But will they ever learn?" Derek asked. "Will they ever change?" Allison looked back at the dying world below. "That is not our decision to make. We give them the chance to grow, just as they gave us. If they become better, we will welcome them. If they do not, they will fade into history like so many others before them." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out every day. Human ships appeared whenever the elder races threatened weaker species. They did not fight. They did not speak. They simply watched, their presence a reminder of what the Council had done and what humanity had become. The younger species flourished under this silent protection. Races that had been bullied and exploited for millions of years suddenly found themselves free. They looked to humanity for guidance, and humanity gave it freely. Technology was shared, knowledge was exchanged, alliances were formed based on respect and cooperation, not fear and domination. The new galactic community grew stronger every century. It was everything the old council had claimed to be, but never was. A true partnership of species, working together for the benefit of all. And the elder races? They watched from the edges, slowly dying, slowly fading. Their empires crumbled. Their populations declined. Their once great civilizations became footnotes in history books that no one read anymore. Some of them changed. A few of the younger elder races, those who had been less vocal in their condemnation of humanity, were welcomed into the new community. They had to prove themselves, had to earn the trust they had once taken for granted, but they were given the chance. Others refused to change. The Korvathi, the Velthari, and a handful of others clung to their old ways, their old pride, their old certainties. They could not accept that the species they had dismissed as children had become their superiors. These were the ones who suffered most. Allison received a transmission from Earth, a message from the human continuity. The annual remembrance ceremony was approaching. Every year, on the anniversary of the exile, humanity paused to remember what had been done to them. Not to fuel hatred, not to celebrate revenge, but to remind themselves why compassion mattered. "We gather today to remember the exile," the message read. "We remember the pain of our ancestors. We remember the injustice that was done to us. And we remember why we chose to be different. We could have become what the Council feared. We could have conquered, destroyed, dominated. Instead, we chose to be better. We chose to build rather than break. We chose mercy over cruelty, even when cruelty would have been easier." Allison listened to the message and felt the familiar weight of history settling on her shoulders. She was a guardian now, one of thousands who watched over the galaxy. It was a responsibility she had not asked for but would never abandon. Derek stood beside her, looking out at the stars. "Do you think they will ever forgive us?" he asked. "The elder races, I mean. Do you think they will ever understand why we did this?" Allison considered the question. Below them, the Korvathi homeworld continued its slow descent into darkness. In another room, somewhere in the galaxy, a human child was learning about the exile for the first time. The cycle continued, generation after generation, a constant reminder of choices made long ago. "Forgiveness is not the goal," she said finally. "Understanding is. They had 800,000 years to learn compassion. They chose fear instead. Now they have another 800,000 years to try again." She turned away from the viewport and walked back toward the bridge. There was work to be done, ships to coordinate, younger species to protect. Behind her, the Korvathi sun flickered weakly in the darkness, a dying ember in a galaxy that had moved on without it. The elder races had wanted humanity to learn a lesson about power and consequence. 800,000 years later, the lesson had finally been learned, just not by the species they had intended.